Hello, my amazing learners, and welcome back to the Wisdom English podcast. My name is Sarah, and I am so excited to have you here with me as we talk about a topic that is absolutely essential for every English learner: the concepts of input and output. If you've ever felt like you're studying a lot but not improving, or that you can understand English but can't speak it, then this episode is just for you. Many learners get frustrated because they have to stop and translate sentences from their native language into English before speaking. It slows them down and kills their confidence. Wouldn't it be amazing if you could skip that translation process and just think and speak in English naturally? Well, I'm here to tell you that it's possible. And make sure you stay with me until the very end, because I'll reveal the simple secret to balancing input and output that will truly accelerate your journey to fluency. Before we dive in, I want you to take a moment and think about how you learned your first language as a child. Did you sit in a classroom studying grammar rules? Did you memorize long lists of words? No, of course not. You simply listened to the world around you. You absorbed what your parents and family were saying. This process of listening and absorbing is what we call input. It fills your brain with the language. Then, one day, after months of input, you spoke your first words. That is output using what you have learned. Imagine if you could apply this same natural method to learning English. The good news is, you can. Many English learners feel stuck. They watch videos, they read books, they listen to English speakers, but when it's time to speak, they feel nervous or don't know what to say. If this sounds like you, then you're in the right place. This episode is designed to help you break free from that struggle by understanding how to balance input and output in a way that actually improves your fluency. Because at the end of the day, we don't just learn English to pass a test. We learn it to communicate, to express ourselves, and to connect with others. So, what can you expect in today's episode? We'll cover what input and output really are, why they are the foundation of language learning, how to balance them so you can actually use the English you understand, and practical tips you can start using today. I promise by the end of this episode, you will have a clear strategy for learning English in a way that actually works. Let's start by diving into the world of English input. Before we get into the specifics, let's consider the general definition of input. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, input refers to something, such as energy, money, or information, that is put into a system so that it can operate. In language learning, input means all the English that you receive and absorb, mainly through listening and reading. It is the information, the raw material, that enters your brain and helps you understand the language before you can ever hope to use it in speaking or writing. Think again about a child learning their first language. Before they start speaking, they spend months, even years, just listening to their parents, watching their expressions, and hearing words repeated over and over. Over time, their brain collects enough input, and one day, they start saying words like mama or dog. The same thing happens when you're learning English. If you listen to English podcasts, watch movies, and read books, your brain stores new words, phrases, and grammar structures. Later, when you start speaking, you naturally use what you have learned. I remember a student of mine, also named Sarah, who wanted to improve her English. Every day, she committed to listening to an English podcast for 20 minutes and reading a short news article. At first, she didn't understand everything, but over time, her brain absorbed new words and phrases. After a few months, she noticed that she could understand conversations more easily and could even use some of the phrases she had heard in her own speaking. Input is the absolute first step to fluency. The more English you listen to and read, the easier it becomes to think, speak, and write naturally. Now that we understand the general concept, let's focus on the first part more deeply. Input. This is where everything begins. Without sufficient input, there can be no output. So what exactly is it, and why is it so important? In simple words, input is any English you take in. It includes everything you hear and everything you read in English. Whenever you listen to an English conversation, watch a movie, or read a book, your brain is actively collecting words, phrases, and sentence structures. This process is essential because before you can speak or write English, which is output, you first need to understand it. Imagine trying to build a house without any bricks, wood, or cement. It sounds impossible, right? The same goes for learning English. Input provides the bricks and mortar for your language house. It gives you the materials you need to form sentences, express your thoughts, and communicate naturally. Many English learners struggle because they don't get enough high-quality input. They focus too much on grammar exercises and memorizing isolated words without actually hearing or seeing those words used in real, meaningful conversations. This can make English feel unnatural and difficult to recall when speaking. The more input you get, the more automatic English becomes. Instead of consciously thinking about grammar rules while speaking, you will begin to naturally form correct sentences, just like how native speakers do. This is why input is the absolute foundation of fluency. However, not all input is the same. There are two main types of input: passive input and active input. Both are useful, but understanding the difference will help you use them more effectively. Passive input happens when you listen to or read English without fully paying attention. This can include playing an English podcast while you're cooking or driving, watching a movie with subtitles but not focusing on the specific words, or having English music playing in the background. This type of input is still useful because it keeps your brain exposed to the sounds and rhythm of English. Even if you don't understand everything, over time your ears get used to the natural flow of English, making it easier to recognize words and phrases later. However, passive input alone is not enough. While it helps you become familiar with the language, it won't make you fluent unless you also practice active input. Active input happens when you fully concentrate on what you're listening to or reading. This means listening carefully to an English podcast and trying to understand every word. It means watching an English video without subtitles and paying close attention to how sentences are formed. It means reading an English book and looking up new words to understand their meaning. Active input is powerful because it forces your brain to process English deeply. When you actively listen or read, you notice patterns, you learn new words, and you see how sentences are structured. This makes it easier to remember and use what you learn in real conversations. To improve your English quickly, you should aim for a combination of both passive and active input. To understand the impact of input, let's look at a couple of real-life examples. Imagine you start listening to an English podcast every day while commuting to work. At first, you only understand a few words. But after a few weeks, your ears start recognizing more words and phrases. You begin to understand full sentences without translating them in your head. After a few months, you notice that you can answer simple questions in English more confidently, all because your brain has absorbed enough input to form responses naturally. Now, let's say you decide to read an English short story every night before bed. At first, you might need to check the dictionary often. But as you continue, you recognize more words and understand sentences faster. After a few months, you find that you can write better in English because you've seen how words and grammar are used correctly in real sentences. Your writing improves naturally because your brain has collected enough input from your reading. A common question I get is, how much input do I need to improve? The answer depends on your goals and your schedule. But let's look at some general estimates. If you listen to 30 minutes of English every day, you will likely see a noticeable improvement in your comprehension in about 3 to 6 months. If you read for 15 minutes daily, your vocabulary and sentence structure will improve in a few months. If you can combine 1 hour of listening and 30 minutes of reading daily, you can reach a conversational level in about a year. These numbers aren't strict rules, but they show one thing very clearly. The more quality input you get, the faster you will improve. If you want to become fluent, you should aim for at least 1 hour of English input every day. Now that we have discussed English input, it's time to talk about the second, equally important half of the language learning process. Output. While input is about absorbing English through listening and reading, output is about using English through speaking and writing. Many learners focus too much on input and avoid output because they feel nervous or afraid of making mistakes. But I want to be very clear. Without output, you cannot become fluent in English. Speaking and writing are what help you turn your passive knowledge into an active, usable skill. Let's first consider the definition. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, output means the amount of something that is produced. In language learning, output refers to the English that you produce, mainly through speaking and writing. It is how you express your own thoughts and ideas after you have received input. Without output, you might understand a lot of English, but you will struggle to communicate effectively. Imagine a musician who listens to a lot of beautiful songs but never practices playing an instrument. They might recognize the music and appreciate it, but they won't be able to create their own music. Similarly, in English, if you only listen and read but never practice speaking or writing, you will understand the language, but you won't be able to use it fluently to express yourself. I remember a student named John, who had been watching English movies for months. He understood many words and could follow the plots, but he felt very nervous when he had to speak. To improve, he started practicing speaking out loud every day and writing a short journal entry in English. At first, he made many mistakes, but with time, he became much more confident and fluent in expressing his ideas. His story shows that output is necessary for fluency. The more you speak and write, the more comfortable you become with using English in real situations. So, why is output so necessary for fluency? Imagine you are learning how to swim. You can watch videos, read books about swimming techniques, and observe professional swimmers. However, if you never actually get into the water and try to swim, can you truly learn how? No. Of course not. You have to practice. The same rule applies to English. Fluency doesn't just come from listening and reading. It comes from actively using the language. Here's why output is essential. First, it helps you remember more. When you speak or write, you force your brain to recall vocabulary and grammar rules. This act of retrieval strengthens your memory and helps you remember words more easily. Second, it builds real confidence. The more you use English, the more comfortable you become. Over time, you will feel less nervous when speaking in real situations. Third, it highlights your weaknesses. When you speak or write, you quickly realize which words or grammar rules you struggle with. This helps you focus on improving those specific areas. And fourth, it trains you to think in English. Speaking and writing regularly help your brain learn to process ideas directly in English, reducing the need to translate from your native language. Just like input, output also comes in different forms. There are two main types: planned output and spontaneous output. Planned output happens when you have time to prepare before you use English. This includes activities like writing an essay for an exam, preparing a presentation for work or school, or carefully drafting an email to a colleague. Planned output is great for organizing your thoughts and improving your writing skills. Since you have time to think, you can focus on using correct grammar, new vocabulary, and clear sentence structures. An effective way to practice planned output is by keeping a daily journal in English. Writing a few sentences every day about your thoughts or experiences can help you improve your ability to express yourself clearly. Spontaneous output happens when you use English in the moment, without any preparation. This includes things like talking to a friend in English, answering a question in class without thinking too much, or speaking English while you are shopping or traveling. This type of output is absolutely essential for fluency, because in real life, you don't always have time to plan your words. Spontaneous speaking forces you to think quickly in English, which helps you respond more naturally. At first, speaking without preparation can feel difficult. You might forget words or make mistakes, but that's okay. The more you practice, the easier it gets. A great way to improve spontaneous speaking is by talking to yourself in English. Try describing what you are doing or thinking out loud. For example, if you are cooking, you can say, "Now I am cutting the vegetables. I need to boil the water." This helps you practice forming sentences naturally. So, how should you balance input and output? Some learners focus too much on input, while others try to speak too much without enough input. To improve quickly, you need a healthy balance between both. A simple guideline to follow is the 70-30 rule. Spend about 70% of your time on input listening and reading, and about 30% of your time on output speaking and writing. It's also important to practice output every day, even if it's just for a few minutes. Try to speak or write something in English daily, and use what you learn. If you learn a new phrase from a book, try using it in a conversation or writing it in a sentence. Think of language learning as a cycle. First, you get input through listening and reading, where you absorb new words, phrases, and grammar. Then, you produce output through speaking and writing, where you use what you have learned, which helps you remember it better. The more you repeat this cycle, the faster you will improve. The best way to improve is to start small and practice consistently. So here is a simple challenge for you. Try to speak for 5 minutes in English every day. You can talk to yourself or record your voice. And try to write 3 to 5 sentences in English daily. You can keep a journal or just write about your day. If you do this, I promise you will see huge improvements in your fluency over time. Now that we've discussed English input and output, the next question is, how do we create a daily routine that balances them effectively? A good English learning routine includes both input and output every day. The key is to use English in different ways, even if you only have a little time. Let's look at some example schedules for different types of learners. If you are a student, you usually have more time to study. In the morning, you could listen to an English podcast for 15 minutes while getting ready for school. In the afternoon, after your classes, you could write a short paragraph about what you learned that day. And in the evening, you could watch a TV show in English for 30 minutes and repeat some of the sentences aloud to practice your pronunciation. If you are a worker with a busy schedule, you can still practice English by using your free time wisely. In the morning, you could listen to an audiobook or podcast on your way to work. During your lunch break, you could write a short message or email in English. And in the evening, you could watch a short English video on YouTube and then summarize it aloud in your own words. Even if you have a very tight schedule, you can still practice English in small ways. In the morning, you can read an English quote or a news headline for just 5 minutes. Throughout the day, you can practice thinking in English while doing daily activities. And in the evening, you can record a 1-minute voice message in English about your day. To improve your fluency, you need to mix input and output together. A great technique is shadowing. Listen to a sentence and repeat it immediately. This improves both your listening and speaking skills. After reading an article, try to explain it in your own words. This helps train your brain to form sentences quickly. You can also try writing a short story and then reading it out loud. This reinforces sentence structure and speaking confidence. The importance of consistency cannot be overstated. Consistency is the real secret to fluency. Even 15 to 30 minutes of practice per day is much better than studying for 3 hours only once a week. Why? Because language learning is like building a habit. When you practice every day, your brain retains the information better. Small, daily practice is more powerful than irregular, long study sessions. However, learning English is a journey, and like any journey, there are obstacles. Many learners make common mistakes that slow down their progress without realizing it. The first mistake is having too much input and too little output, or the other way around. As we discussed, you need a balance. The 70-30 rule is a good guideline. The second mistake is over-reliance on passive input. While playing English videos in the background can be helpful, it is not enough. You must also have periods of active, focused learning. And the third major mistake is the fear of making mistakes in your output. This fear stops people from practicing. The truth is, mistakes are a natural part of learning. You have to accept that mistakes are normal and see them as learning opportunities. The final secret. We have covered a lot in this podcast, and I hope you now have a clear understanding of how English input and output work together to help you learn the language effectively. We've learned that input, through listening and reading, is the foundation. We've learned that output, through speaking and writing, is the key to activating your knowledge and building fluency. And we've learned that the key is to find a healthy balance and to practice consistently. Now, the most important thing is to start applying what you've learned today. Knowledge is powerful, but only if you use it. If you keep listening to podcasts and watching videos without practicing speaking or writing, your progress will be slow. But if you make a simple plan and start practicing a little bit every day, you will see huge improvements. And now, for the final secret I promised you at the very beginning. The secret to balancing input and output effectively and making your learning truly effortless is this. Every piece of input should have a purpose for future output. What does this mean? It means when you are listening or reading, you should do so with the intention of using what you learn. When you listen to a podcast, don't just listen for understanding. Listen for a cool new phrase that you can use in a conversation later that day. When you read an article, don't just read for information. Find an interesting sentence structure that you can try to use in your journal entry tonight. When your input has a purpose, your learning becomes much more active and effective. So, my challenge for you is this. For the next week, every time you listen to or read something in English, find just one thing, one word, one phrase, one idea that you will actively try to use in your own speaking or writing within 24 hours. Write it down and make it your mission to use it. This simple habit will completely change the way you learn. Please like, share, and subscribe to the Wisdom English podcast channel to watch our next videos.